Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back talking vintage sports in the zone. I'm Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We've got a full panel of mavens, experts, friends, big brother to me, all of those things wrapped up in one. This has been ongoing and terrific. Let's start with hello, Al Blumkin.
Hello.
Nice to hear your voice, my friend. George Case III.
Hi there. Hi, everybody.
Hi, George. And David Hubler is here.
Yes, hello to you all.
Hello, David. And Hal Bock, Mr.
Hi, everybody.
Harold Bock on Facebook.
Yes.
And that threw you for a loop when you were hacked, I remember.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It threw me for a loop, too. I said, who is this guy? Harold. I know Hal. I don't know Harold.
Right.
My mother used to call me Harold.
I'll bet she reserved it for certain times.
Yes, that's true. That's quite true.
As all of our mothers. And we had middle names, too, in those times. Ralph Mark Tyko.
Alan Martin Blumkin.
Yes, right? Okay, my friends. Let's start with... this is going to be sad. That the happiest part of the show is knowing that you're here, guys, because we lost another of the 6 Hall of Famers that we lost within a period of weeks. And Whitey Ford was absolutely mind-blowing to all of us. Who is left that is anywhere near as immortal as these guys that we've lost? I hate that. Willie's left. Henry
Kubek.
Aaron is left. Kubek, yes, Richardson.
I wouldn't put Kubek in that place. In Aaron.
No, not necessarily, but
the era.
He was that era, yeah, right.
And a damn good ball player. Alan, you're a Yankee fan. Start with you and your memory of Whitey Ford.
Okay, I saw a documentary on the Yes Network the other day, and Whitey Ford was being interviewed. Excuse me, and the first funny story he told was when he was introduced to Berra in 1949 after Ford signed with the Yankees. So and they took him to the clubhouse, and the clubhouse guy said, "Eddie, meet Larry." He said that was the last time that ever happened.
Well, I wonder if Eddie Ford Jr. ever met Larry Bird Jr. Wasn't
Junior.
And wasn't he a football player, Larry Bird?
No, the second one, Tim Berra played here with the then Baltimore Colts.
Yes.
So anyway, Ford was calling up the Yankees in 1949. He was pitching in Binghamton. And when that minor league season ended, he called up the Yankees and offered his services for the 1949 pennant race. And he came up in 1950. He was 9-1 and won the 4th World Series game. And then he went to the Army for 2 years, came back and didn't miss a beat.
That didn't go lost on me. He called the team and offered his services.
Yeah.
He had what we used to call moxie.
Yeah,
right?
He was 18 years old at that point.
Right, exactly. From Astoria, New York.
Yeah.
Right. Very close to
sorry, 19. He was 19. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, he came out and was basically the Yankee ace, and he was the bridge between the retirements of Allie Reynolds, Vic Raschi, and Eddie Lopat to the next generation of pitchers. After the
I have a couple of Whitey Ford stories for you.
If you would, how about?
This is me, Harold.
Harold.
That's me.
Heshy.
I have
Heshy.
two Whitey. Heshy? Yeah, that's right. My grandmother called me Heshy. I have two Whitey Ford stories.
Okay.
What's that?
No, my uncle was Uncle Harold, and whose Harold grandmother didn't call him Heshy.
Heshy, that's right. So let me tell you two Whitey Ford stories that I have for you. The first one was when he was a kid, when he first signed, like 18 years old. And the Yankees assigned him to one of their low minor league teams. In those years, we had minor league teams. And they were in North Carolina, some small town in North Carolina. The team he was on was managed by Lefty Gomez, who was one of the great Yankee pitchers. He's in the Hall of Fame. And Gomez was not only a great pitcher, but he was a great prankster. He loved to have fun. So now they were in North Carolina, and he's got a 10 o'clock curfew. And Whitey and one of his teammates is walking around this carnival, and they see the Ferris wheel, and it's 10 minutes to 10. And Whitey says, well, we have time for one ride on the Ferris wheel, and we'll go back to the hotel. So they go to the Ferris wheel, they get on the Ferris wheel, and away they go. And Ferris wheel is moving very slowly, so slowly that it's 10 o'clock, and they're still on the Ferris wheel. That's bad news, right? They get off the Ferris wheel, it's a couple of minutes after 10, and they sprint back to the hotel. Well, there waiting in the lobby is Lefty Gomez, the manager. And Gomez says, you guys are late, you broke curfew, it's going to cost you. And he fined each of them $5. And now we fast forward the camera to like 10 years later, and Whitey Ford is a major league star, and he's best pitcher on the Yankee staff and so forth. And they have an old-timer game at Yankee Stadium, and of course Lefty Gomez is there. And Gomez is talking to Whitey, and he's kind of kibitzing with him, and he said, told him the story about the Ferris wheel. He confessed. And Ford was very angry. And Ford said, well, you son of a gun, you owe me $10. Well, it wasn't $10, it was $5. So Ford made $5 on the deal. It took him 10 years later, but he made a profit. And then the other story I have, the other Whitey Ford story I have is the 1961 All-Star game was in San Francisco. And Whitey was going to be the starting pitcher for the American League All-Stars. Now, the day before the game, he's invited by Horace Stoneham's son, Peter Stoneham. He and Mickey Mantle are invited to play golf at a prestigious San Francisco club. And Peter Stoneham says, just sign my father's name if you want anything, you want to buy anything. Oh, that's a great opportunity, right? So Whitey and Mickey signed for $200 worth of golf stuff. And the next day, Horace Stoneham learns of this, and he says, look, I'm willing to forgive that debt. He says this to Whitey. I'm willing to forgive that debt. If you can retire Willie Mays, who was at the top of his game at that time, then we'll forget about the $200. But if Mays gets a hit off you, we double it. It becomes $400. Okay, Whitey took the deal. And the first inning of the game, Mays comes to bat. Now, Mays owned Whitey Ford in those days. He was like 9 for 20 against Whitey. Whitey's on the mound, and he knows what the deal is. And so does Mantle, by the way, in center field. And Whitey gets two strikes on Willie Mays. Now he turns his back to the plate, and he loads up the pitch. Spitball. He called it the biggest spitball he ever threw, and he probably threw a few. He winds up, and he strikes out Willie Mays. The debt is erased. And in center field, Mickey Mantle is jumping and clapping like the Yankees had just won the World Series. So that was Whitey Ford. He was a whimsical character. He was a mischievous guy. He liked to have fun, and he had a lot of fun, and he was a great pitcher. Okay.
Before we get to David Hubbler, I just want to note that he and Bobby Shantz and the likes of those guys, we will never see again because of their size. They're not strikeout pitchers, and we will miss the craftiness of these guys.
You could throw Harvey Haddix, Billy Pierce, and Ed Wopat into that category.
Yes. Well, Chance was a Yankee, as a matter of fact, and a teammate.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Of Whitey Ford, and a battery mate on the Yankees for a very short period with Billy Chance.
No, he wasn't on the Yankees; he was on the A's.
Yeah, but no,
the A's. Yeah,
I think Billy, for just a short period of time, was with the Yankees.
You may be right. Okay, we tracked that. Yeah.
Okay, and you may be right, Alan. And if I'm right and you're wrong, we're going to have a block party on 908 Lincoln. Around, because that doesn't happen very often. So
they wouldn't even look at these guys today.
No, exactly. David, your memories of David Hubbler, your memories of Whitey Ford.
You know, when you're talking about his size and everything, the Yankees brought up, I believe he was also a left-hander. Then there's Bill Short. And he, too, was...
Yes.
Yeah.
He was up with Whitey Ford, because I was there. I saw him. And, in fact, when I went to interview Bobby Richardson, Bobby Shantz was in the room the whole time at their hotel. At the Concourse Plaza, but anyway, he was sort of billed as the next, the next Whitey Ford, but he sort of fizzled out. He never really made it very well. I do remember watching him though in the 50 World Series, the fourth game when he started against the A's. And I was in high clover then because the Yankees had already won the first three, and the Whiz Kids didn't look very whizzy like in that World Series. I remember he did not complete the game, but he did get the win. And he was just lights out throughout his career. I mean, I think if the Yankees had a pitcher of his caliber and stamina and guile, they might have beaten. They might have come through this past series and beaten Tampa Bay. The Yankee pitching has not been the same. I'm going to go out on a limb and say since the guys like Whitey Ford and Ron Guidry and guys that just went in there and won,
Yes.
Guidry was like a modern Whitey Ford because he's a slight guy, little guy too.
Right. Yeah.
And ironically was a good friend of Yogi's in spring training, and there was a book written either by Guidry...
Driving Mr. Yogi. Driving Mr. Yogi, yeah.
Well, good memories. George Case III, you have a first-hand memory, a family memory of Mr. Ford.
Yeah, well, I do, Ralph, and it was one, matter of fact, I posted it a couple of weeks ago, a photograph. Whitey and my dad were guests at a baseball dinner in Trenton, New Jersey, and Whitey was in his second year, actually. His first year, as Alan had mentioned, he went 9-0. I think he went 9-0 his first 9 games, and then he lost in relief. I think his only loss that year. But then Whitey, because the Korean conflict started, Whitey was called into service, and so the photograph I have is Whitey and my dad at this head table, and Whitey's in his Army uniform, and he missed 2 full seasons. And then when he came back out of service, then, he picked right up again. But, my memories of Whitey, and I saw him pitch many times. I mean, he's just a terrific pitcher, not overpowering, but as we've talked, he knew how to pitch. And, you change speeds, you come 3/4, you might come overhand, you might come sidearm. and you're really relying on getting the hitter to bite on the pitch you wanted him to hit. And so Whitey was not going to be somebody that's throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. He's going to mix up speeds and just a terrific pitcher. And I wanted to mention how, and if you wanted to relate it a little bit, I read the article, I guess it was this morning, that you had written about Whitey, and I happened to see it. And since we're talking with Alan, it was in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and it was the article with your byline, and it was a terrific article, Hal. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about it, because I'm just curious as to why, when I go on and I looked at Whitey Ford, and here's this wonderful article about Whitey Ford in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette with your byline.
Syndication. Am I correct, Hal?
What's that?
Syndication.
That's the secret.
I realized the syndication. I just wasn't sure, when you wrote that. I mean, are articles still syndicated? In other words, if you write for Newsday or whatever you're writing for, they can pick it up and publish it anywhere, and
they do whatever they want with it. They do whatever they want with it. I write for a website. Currently write for a website called New York Sports Day.
Right.
And I have free reins. I write whatever I want. I did write a piece about Gibson. I wrote a piece about Whitey Ford. I wrote a piece about the Big Ten deciding to suspend football and then deciding to play football. So I have, I just write about everything, and I usually write one a week, sometimes two a week, and it's an opportunity for me to continue to write, which is what I enjoy most.
Well, Hal, I thought it was a wonderful article. I mean, I was sort of stunned when I'm looking at it. I'm saying the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which I'm very familiar with, the paper, and I know Alan is, but I thought to myself, man, I know this guy who wrote the article. So,
and he knows you.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, and I'm proud of it. Believe me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
it was a very well written, Hal, and I wanted to congratulate you on it, because it was a nice story about Whitey, and as we talked about, I mean, he was a real character, but he was a talented pitcher. I'm telling you, if you wanted to win a ball game, Stengel would go to Whitey, and he'd more likely come out with a win. And the other thing I just wanted to mention while we're talking about it, I did a little quick research today when my dad was the third base coach for Mickey Vernon and the Senators. 2 years the Senators played when Whitey was pitching. 1961, Whitey was 3-0. 1962, Whitey was 4-0. So, he was able to handle Washington without any problem whatsoever, and he had some great records. I mean, if you look at Whitey's, 1 year, and I think it was 61, he was 25-4, which is incredible.
Yes, that's correct.
And then in 63, he was 24-7. I mean, if you're a pitcher in the major leagues and you have that kind of winning percentage, I mean, that is just unheard of. They were great. And Whitey, as we've talked, was not overpowering, but boy, he knew how to pitch.
There's a
let me ask David real quick and Alan about how much Louis Arroyo fit into that.
Wow.
Well, how?
That brings back memories.
Yeah.
He too was of small stature, or whatever you'd like to call him. He wasn't a big guy, but boy, he was lights out as a reliever. I mean, he'd come in. I think the first real reliever I remember on the Yankees was Joe Page, the fireman, and after that, he was probably one of the most prolific closers. They weren't even called closers in those days. They were just, the guy who was coming in and
he was Mariano Rivera before Mariano Rivera.
Yes.
In 1962, the Yankees were playing in Detroit, and very early in the season, it was about 35 degrees there for the game, and both Louis Arroyo and Frank Larry of the Tigers, who's a Yankee killer, blew their arms out because of that weather.
In the same game?
I have a question for this panel.
Whoa.
I have a question for the panel. We have lost really a great rotation, pitching rotation, from 3 of them in the Hall of Fame. One should have been in the Hall of Fame, but isn't, this season, this summer. We lost Tom Seaver, we lost Bob Gibson, we lost Whitey Ford, who we've been talking about, and we lost Don Newcomb. Now, those are 4 great pitchers of the era that I grew up in, the 50s and the late 40s and so forth. I want to know, if you had to win one game, your life depended on it, one game, win or lose,
Right.
Which one of those 4 would you pick?
Well, not Newcomb. Newcomb was 0-4 with an 8.59 ERA in the World Series.
Okay, so you're eliminating Newcomb.
Yeah,
now,
the
what
other
are
three is
the other 3?
You can just
you can make a case for any of those.
Any of them, right?
Any of them, and how could you be wrong on any of them?
Well, I'll tell you who my choice was.
Okay, you have an opinion, and that's great. You're not wishy-washy like me.
Bob Gibson. Bob Gibson had an attitude on the mound, and there's a famous story about him that I was telling somebody today. Gibson did not like to have visitors to his place of business. He was on the mound, he was in charge. So now he's pitching in a game for the Cardinals, and he gets in a little trouble. And his catcher was Tim McCarver. Tim McCarver would talk to a wall. Tim McCarver was a chatterbox. He loved to talk to people. So now Gibson gets in a little bit of a jam, and McCarver decides he's going to go visit the mound. And he comes walking out to visit Gibson, and he gets within about 10 feet, and Gibson says to him, "What are you doing here? The only thing you know about pitching is you can't hit it." McCarver does a U-turn and goes back behind the plate.
That's a great story. Terrific story.
Gibson had a 1.12 ERA in 1968.
That was a dead ball year. Yeah.
He threw, I think, 9 shutouts that season.
Well, didn't they
had to
change the mound? Change the rules, the height of the mound.
That's right.
And Ralph, they did an interview with Bobby Richardson on MLB Network after Whitey passed. And he said, we love to play behind him because there's no wasted motion.
Right.
Gibson was like that also. You get the ball back, you pitch, and that's it. No pulling on your hat or playing around with the Rosenberg or anything like that, any distraction like that. He said they loved playing behind Whitey. And after the big 3 retired, Whitey was the only their pitching staffs were Whitey Ford and pitchers that were very good or great for 1 or 2 years.
A bunch of injuries, Cooks, Dimaggio, all those guys going down.
All of them.
And they go back and forth between Kansas City.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
Kansas City was like a AAA team for the Yankees.
Yeah, I was at the...
I always, when I covered games, and I covered a few, I always appreciated a pitcher who came out there and pitched. And the Mets had a pitcher named Steve Traxel. And Traxel would take the ball and he'd walk around the mound and he'd look at the ball and he'd just waste a lot of time. And I remember one time somebody yelled from the press box, "Throw the ball, take a chance. Take a chance, see what happens. Maybe you'll get a strike." Those guys frustrated me something awful. Because, listen, that's your job to pitch. And Ford knew that, and so did Gibson.
Yeah,
and you know what it does? It keeps the infield on their toes, and it makes for a nice, clean game if you pitch the ball, and it lets
Max Scherzer is like that now. If you watch Max Scherzer pitch, gets the ball back, flips it into his hand, and off he goes. No wasted motion, no time running around the mound.
Who are you talking about?
He's just a machine. Max Scherzer.
Oh, Scherzer. Yeah, you're right. That's correct.
and it doesn't give the batter the chance to settle in and get ready. It's at the pitcher's pace, and that's always good. But there have been some schleppers. Talk Bob Turley, guys.
Bob Turley blew his arm out after 1958. Yeah, he was used 3 straight days in the World Series of 1958. He won the Cy Young Award, and then starting in 1959, he was 8-11, and just couldn't get anybody out. And his last year with the Yankees, he gave up a hit to Ryan Duran, who was on the Angels, and then he gave up a 3-run homer to Albie Pearson, and that was basically it.
Albie Pearson, who was about the same size as Bobby Chance.
Yeah, Pearson was like 5'7". He looked like a little leaguer out there.
Yeah.
Hey,
but he was
of that, we can't forget Joe Morgan. Can't forget Joe Morgan, who died too. He was not of enormous stature, but one hell of a ball player.
No, he was a great player, no question. I was shocked when I heard about Morgan because I didn't even know he was sick. And, because I think the last time I saw him, he was still doing play-by-play or something on television. And, a terrific player. And a lot of the Reds, they credited him with really being the glue that kept all that together. Because he was surrounded by, great players, but he really gave him that steadiness at second base and, could run, could hit, could throw. I mean, he was a terrific player.
And very smart.
Everybody remembers in the 75 World Series, Fred Lynn's home run in Game 6, where he stood at the plate and waved the ball into fair territory. Joe Morgan got the winning hit in the 9th inning of that World Series, of Game 7 of that World Series. He was a terrific ball player.
That was Carlton Fisk.
I said Carlton Fisk. What did I say?
Fred Lynn.
Oh, no, I meant Carlton Fisk. You're right.
Yeah.
But Joe Morgan had the winning hit in that World Series.
Yeah. His grandson seems like a real comer. What's his name? Yastrzemski's grandson is playing for Toronto, I believe, now.
No, he's playing for the
Giants.
Yeah.
The Giants. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
One of those foreign teams.
That's kind of weird. It's an amazing lineage. Let's put it that way. Let me ask you this: there
are a lot of young players, sons of great players, who are around the major leagues these days. I know that Toronto has a player from the Hall of Fame, whose father is in the Hall of Fame.
Biggio, yeah.
Right, Biggio. That's right.
Vlad Guerrero Jr.
That's another one.
The third one is
the best one of all may be in San Diego. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Fernando Tatis's son is apparently a real star. Fernando Tatis Jr.
Well, now because the money is so big,
it's an interesting phenomenon because it's been happening for a good number of years now. We've got a lot of ball players who have come up whose fathers played in the major leagues, but prior to 55, 50, you didn't hear of that very often at all.
You're right.
And guys didn't ever live up to their dads. I remember the Sislers. Sons, but then came the Boones and the Bretts and the Griffeys.
No, you mean you mean the Bells.
Or
not the Bretts.
Oh, the Bells, right. Not the Bretts. That was the first name.
But Yogi's son was never all that good.
Well, Dale.
He played it.
I was at a game in Yankee Stadium when Dale Berra, they're losing by a run to Texas, and there's man on base, and Dale Berra came up, and I said to the people I was with, he's not Yogi, who would, deliver all the time in the clutch. And Dale grounded out to end the inning.
Hey, wait a second, too. George can tell a story about expectations. Who was Yogi? I think that's a very fair very unfair statement. Puts a lot of pressure on the kid. I won't ask you to tell that story again, George, but
yeah. Well, what you're talking about is players with the same name, and for me personally, I mean, it was a little bit of a problem for me because I was playing baseball and playing in the same area where my dad played, and we had the same name and all that kind of stuff. But I just happened to have some skill, and so it was okay. But I did mention a while ago a prime example of the father and son relationship. Joe Dimaggio, as great a player as he was, his son, his name was Joe Dimaggio Jr., went to Lawrenceville Prep, then went to Yale, I think. Never played baseball because he said he just couldn't ever, whenever he went anywhere, people would say, hey, you must be Joe's son. And so he picked up a different sport, which I think he played football. And as it turned out, long term in his adulthood, he became homeless. Joe had pretty much abandoned him as a youngster. Joe loved the limelight, and this kid was really left to go on his own. And it was really a bad scene. And, another one that comparable, as it turned out, a little bit different ending, but the great Ted Williams, his son, John Henry, he managed Ted's post-baseball career. And a lot of fans and a lot of former teammates of Ted's used to get very annoyed because they couldn't even talk to Ted without going through his son, John Henry. And
he was a
John
failed
Henry,
minor leaguer too.
Yeah, he was. He played and didn't do well at all, but decided, he was going to live off his father's memory, and he decided, whenever Ted did any autograph shows or signed anything, he was going to make sure that everything went through John Henry first. And it's a very difficult story.
And if they bring Ted back,
the same thing with Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle's boys never.
I've got a Whitey Ford story. Okay, the Sabre National Convention was here in New York in 2017, and one of the people there was Whitey Ford's granddaughter. Different last name because she was the daughter of Whitey Ford's daughter.
Right.
And the Whitey Ford's daughter got married, and the last name
had a different name. Yeah.
So I was able to speak to her about 15 minutes after the presentation on Yogi Berra. I told her how much I admired Whitey. He was a bedrock of with Mickey and Yogi of that dynasty, and I asked her how he was doing. She said he's holding his own, but he misses Yogi Berra, terribly.
Tremendously, yeah.
And so I asked her how her mother was, and she told me it was reaching a point with Whitey where the family released that I think it was 2 years before he passed, that he wouldn't sign anything anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, because a lot of these collectors are like leeches.
Yeah, well, they are, Alan, and I can tell you, that story has been repeated several times by other players, and I know my friend, we've talked about Jeff Torberg. Jeff has Parkinson's, and so he can't physically sign anymore because his hand shakes so much that he can't do it. But while we're talking about this, Alan, I want to bring this up because I just realized today when I saw something. Today is the 60th anniversary of the 1960 World Series win with Mazeroski hitting that home run.
I was there.
And I know you were. I just happened to read it this morning, and then I saw that they had some kind of celebration in Pittsburgh at the Forbes Field, whatever is left of the wall or something. They do that at what, every October?
Every year.
Okay, right. Well, I just wanted to mention it, Alan, because you being such a, obviously a great Yankees fan, but with all your experience growing up as a college student in Pittsburgh, and I did not realize until I picked it up this morning that this is the 60th anniversary of that event.
Yeah, I was a freshman at Pitt back then. That's the only time I've ever rooted against the Yankees in the World Series. And the odds of the Pirates making the World Series in the next couple of years are about 1,000,000 to 1. But anyway,
that was a wacky World Series.
Yeah,
the Yankees outscored them in every game except the ones they
dominated. They dominated the runs. That's absolutely true, Al.
Yeah, that was the first presentation I ever did at a Sabre meeting in 1985 because I had interviewed Dick Rote a couple of months before. There was a Pitt basketball connection. And my presentation turned out to be the last 2 innings of Game 7. And the way I got in, after Smith hit the home run, we were in one of the Pitt dormitories, and we were watching on TV. Me and this friend of mine decided to go over there. The Forbes Field was just 2 blocks away. And we were able to sneak into the left field bleachers at the top of the 9th. And we're crouching, so we don't interfere with anybody's vision. And Maserati gets up and hits a home run, and the place went nuts. And I always say that that game had gone longer, we might have been arrested.
Well,
I was 17.
You know what was interesting there, and we talked about Yogi Berra. Correct me, Alan, if I'm wrong. I think Yogi Berra was playing left field.
Yeah.
Yes, he
and
was.
The ball went over. He just turned around and looked at it as it went over to left field fence.
Yeah, and Blanchard was catching, and Howard had broken his finger in an earlier game, so he couldn't play.
And let me tell you a little bit of Casey Stangel's last game that he managed. He generally took out Kubek, put him in left field, put in DeMaestri, and took out Berra, put Kubek in left. He'd been doing that for a lot of games when they had the lead. He fell asleep and just didn't do it that game, and it would have turned out differently. No question about it, if DeMaestri was a short.
Ralph, DeMaestri went in when Kubek had to leave the game when he got hit in the throat by that ground ball.
Right, he would, but generally he would have put DeMaestri in before he got hit with the foul with the ground ball. So
DeMaestri was another one of those guys. DeMaestri was another one of those guys that made the transfer from Kansas City.
The
Yankees came over with Roger Maris, as a matter of fact.
That was an express train from Kansas City to the Bronx.
There's a great story about the relationship with Kansas City and the Yankees.
There's a book on
that. When Cleveland dealt Maris to Kansas City, they celebrated in the Yankee dugout because they knew it was just a matter of time till the Yankees would get Maris. They had, and it happened. But DeMaestri came over with him in that trade to work out pretty well. And speaking of trades, before we run out of time, and Yankee pitchers, the big trade was with the Baltimore Orioles when they got Turley and Don Lawson, a host of other guys. If you guys want to talk about that, or you have memories of that.
I can discuss that.
Well, we also lost Don Larson this year, by the way.
Yeah,
I was going to mention that. Yes,
Larson was
earlier.
Earlier in the year.
Larson was 3-21 the previous years, and the thing that upset me most about that trade, I thought it was pretty good, except for one thing. The Yankees sent Gene Woodling, who was one of my favorites. They had an injury-riddled year in 1954. they sent him there, and they kept Irv Noren, who was 319. Irv Noren went back to hitting 260, and he wound up with the A's, of course, and Woodley had several excellent years for the Indians.
Yeah, well, Woodling was one of my favorite ball players, too. I hated to see him leave, and I could never even look at him in an Oriole uniform, It just wasn't the same guy.
Or worse yet, a Met uniform when he was Taka over the hill.
Yeah, well, there's a story.
One of many used-up players that the Mets brought in.
Oh, yeah.
There's a story, another Casey Stengel story, when Woodling was sitting the Mets was sitting next to Casey Stengel in the dugout, and Casey turns to him and said, "Ain't like the old days, is it?"
Hey, listen, guys, under the circumstances, with all of those who have passed away, we had a very, very nice show. We were able to put their memories into perspective and realize, like, Whitey was 91 years old, and he lived a good life. So God bless him. God bless us all. How about that? Keep surviving, guys, and we'll do it again a month from tonight.
Okay.
That's terrific. I look forward to it next month, and let's hope we're all able to talk about something on the bright side a month from now, because it was a tough thing tonight to talk baseball after losing such great guys that they live in our memories, that's for sure, and we remember them as great players, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and it's hard. So I'm with you all, and I look forward to talking again.
Yeah, like I always say, you're getting old when your old baseball heroes are dying.
Yep, you're right about that. Yep.
And so, but you're not getting older, you're getting better. Well, think of it that way. We're ripe. God knows we're ripe. Thank you, David Hubler, Alan Blumkin, George Case III, and Harold Hal Bock. Eshy. Love you guys all. Believe me.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yep.
Adios.
Bye-bye.